Welcome all. I'm Rania Francoeur from the Brain Trust Professional Institute, and today we are back again sharing more of our insider perspective on planning leadership retreats for max impact. The focus of today's session is going to be the budgetary considerations, how to set the budget for your offsite, any hidden costs, what your choices are signaling to your team, and how your decisions really do have a lasting impact. So to kick us off, we're going to have, as usual, Randall Craig, Brain Trust CEO, share a few ideas, and we'll flip into questions from you, questions from me. So a little bit about Randall for those who don't yet know Randall. He has founded several successful startups. He's held a long time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company. He's the author of 8 books. In the Speaker Hall of Fame, master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses with executive coaching, leadership retreats, and facilitating conversations to align teams. I want to acknowledge here that Randall's not feeling very well today, but thank you for showing up, Randall, for everyone who registered in advance, and let's get to it. Okay, Randall, where do you want to start today?
I think it's a good place to start, really. When we talk about retreat budgeting, it's also a question of really retreat ROI. And the question of how do you maximize the ROI? It's a function certainly of cost, which is really where our focus is today. But it's also a question of okay, so what do you actually do during the retreat to get that ROI? I've certainly got some notes about sort of breaking down the different cost categories and how to I don't want to say reduce the cost, but make sure that any spend that you do on the retreat is has got a good focus. I will say that while we've worked with a lot of meeting planners and event organizers, our focus has always been the content on it, and not the logistics, which is where so many of the costs are. But we've been in a bit of a bird's eye view to be able to see kind of where all that goes and where sometimes that spend is worthwhile and sometimes where it isn't as well. So if somebody wants to ask me, is it better to have green tablecloths or purple ones? Or sorry, that's kind of not really where we are. But if it's a question of saying, okay, does it make sense to do this versus that, from a content, from an activity, from an agenda perspective, and is will we get more bang out of our investment dollars if we do this versus that? We'll probably have an informed decision on where that is. So. I've got a whole bunch of notes. Why don't we just start off with some questions, Rania, and the audience, and we'll just take it from there.
Sure. Thank you for everyone that's here. Thank you so much. The hour is yours, and you get priority. If you'd like to have any questions or get any perspective on anything, you can type your question in the chat. You can come on mic. You can put your little Zoom hand up, whatever you'd like. Interrupt, jump on in. It's an informal room here. I'll get us started with the first question just to get some ideas going. Randall, I've heard you advise clients about, when it comes to costs, starts with scoping the size of the problem. So if there's a problem within your organization, what is the appropriate spend to solve that problem? And that calculation starts with understanding, what is the business impact? How much money is it costing you? So when it comes to setting that budget for a retreat, would you say the same approach applies?
I think it is. Most organizations, get some time once a year at least where the management team or the board can work on the business rather than in the business. And so sometimes it's, gee, we've got to solve a particular problem. The problem is in X millions of dollars, and gee, if we have a small part of a budget that we could put towards that retreat to help do that, yes, there's that specific ROI. We can also take a look at it and say, well, gee, if the purpose of the retreat is, say, strategic planning, or maybe it's post-merger and you really need to sort of solve the question of the team working together, or culture, or decision making, or whatever the thing is that needs to be solved. If it's possible to actually say, what is the size of the problem? And that's part of the conversations, not to determine the budget, if you will, but just to sensitize everybody on there that there's a bit of an ROI calculation that should actually take place. So sometimes when the problem is software, it's harder to do that. Okay. Sometimes people are moving so quickly that we forget that there's a cost to take people out of the day job to spend the 1, 2, 3 days away plus travel sometimes to work on the business. But if we're able to generate that alignment, very often the problem goes away or the opportunity has got a greater probability of being realized. So good question. Good question.
Randall, when we were planning this session, we talked about, the list items you said, travel, food, all the facilitator. What about the hidden costs? What are people not thinking about? Even when you've hosted retreats, things slip in.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. You're right, Ron. There are explicit costs, and I think we could name them. I mean, there's the transportation, there's the venue costs, there's the food costs. If there's a special activity, for example, that's got a cost. Obviously, for people like us, the facilitator and the programming, that's a cost. And you're right. The hidden costs are ones that we kind of forget about. Okay. The cost of participants' time. If you've got 8, 12 executives, we did a retreat where there was about 3 dozen executives flown in from all around internationally. The cost of their transportation, the cost of their time, if you just take their salary cost and divide it by the amount of time they're away from the office, these are huge, huge, huge costs. And so, it isn't something that you should be doing just, well, higgledy-piggledy, let's just get together for a couple of days for a powwow. No, no, this is very expensive. Some other hidden costs, the opportunity cost of actually being away from the office, away from the business, because things that were, particularly in faster moving businesses, things that happen don't get done if you're not actually there. The planning costs, the internal coordination. Usually there's an administrative person or a meeting planner, et cetera, who or an event organizer that's when it's internal, not writing a check, but you are taking somebody's time. There's the cost of doing it wrong. Okay. What if people leave jaded? Okay. Or they say this has been a big waste of time. Or nothing actually happens. Some retreats, organizations get into a bit of a um, I don't want to say rut, but into a practice, for example, of using the retreat exclusively as a reward for a job well done, as opposed to saying, hey, listen, if we're getting these people together, maybe we can actually do something that we can do together we couldn't do, for example, on alone. So, that's the cost of no impact, because when people go back after this kind of retreat, or if it's a good retreat, but there's no follow-up or there's no accountability process built into it, that's a cost too, right? Because it's an opportunity cost. So there's a fair amount of hidden costs and everything beyond the explicit ones that sometimes people forget about. And um, I'll ramble on for a moment. There are some things that are not so hard, for example, to do to say, okay, if we look at each one of these line items, the explicit costs and the hidden costs, are there things that we can do to be a little bit more economical, and also achieve the objectives of the benefits? And let me give you an example. Transportation. Is it possible, for example, rather than everyone booking their own transportation and sort of getting to wherever that venue is on their own, what if you could make it so people can travel in pairs? Okay, they take flights with a colleague. What if, for example, if it's within driving distance, people carpool there? The goal isn't to save dollars on transportation, although that might happen. The goal is to start the conversations that happen between people and the tighter relationship building, while people actually are in transit. The question of venue is an interesting one. We've been to some beautiful places, just beautiful. It's very conducive to to having people inspired by their surroundings. We've been to places that are just pretty good, and pretty good is usually for many good enough. We've been to some places in the past where it's not been particularly inspiring. It was kind of like off-brand, if you will, for the organization. If an organization speaks to quality and performance, etc., and you're in a venue where those attributes are not being modeled, it's kind of hard. Okay. And we've also been to ones where there was no budget for a venue. And so we suggested, what about doing an on-site, off-site? So we take people away from their jobs, but maybe what we do is we go to another floor or another location in the city, if you will. And it might not have the full impact, but if the cost is an issue, this is the idea of a creative way to do it. Same thing with the food. If we look at just that explicit line item, you know, many people like a fine wine, but can people tell the difference between a $450 bottle of wine and a $100 bottle of wine? The answer is probably not. And if you've got a large table or tables filled with people, it's pretty amazing how quickly that bill goes up, probably unnecessarily. Maybe the first bottle is a beautiful bottle, but maybe the rest of them don't need to be, right? I acknowledge that the wine together, the meal together is an important part of the relationship building. And you're not going to take people to the Waffle House or McDonald's for the team dinner, if you will. But what you do is you can do things like having a prefix menu. You can do things about watching sort of where you're spending and deciding where you want to spend the money. Okay, when you've actually got it. Same thing with the facilitator and the programming, the kind of stuff that we do. Um, Here's the question. Does the facilitator actually use the same program for everybody? And therefore, the degree of customization is just adding your name, the client's name on the slide, right? Or is the program completely customized, dealing with your very, very specific issues, right? It's a lot more work with the facilitator, but the outcome that happens is going to be dramatically different. Why? Because it's suddenly relevant to everybody, right? I can go through all of these things and more and sort of point out, okay, how do we use that money? How do we use that budget efficiently? There's a sort of joke, in a certain sense that we sometimes spend more money on the coffee than the content. We want to kind of make sure that, the fact that somebody has more coffee sometimes doesn't guarantee the best outcome compared to spending money on good facilitation, just as an example, right? We have to make sure that people get what they need when they're there. Otherwise, any of the money that's spent is money not well spent.
So I appreciate some of the examples you brought up, like the fancy hotels, the fancy travel, fancy meals, fancy wine, does it add? How much does it add? Ultimately, everything adds a little bit, but when it comes to, how important is it to spend? So I wanted to invite everyone here in a thought exercise. Maybe we could do some compare and contrast options and see where is there really, really a lot of value here, or are we splitting hairs, or should we really invest here? Okay. So the first thought I had, which we have not talked about in previous sessions, I tried to do that for I think we haven't talked about yet. I want to talk about budgeting time in the agenda for group fitness, meditation time, a walk in the woods together. I find this an interesting idea because we suggest this to a lot of our clients, and most of them do not pick this up because time is of the essence. They're together, they want to get the learning going, the topics, the strategy, all that good stuff. And yet, all the research points to the fact that this fitness time, meditation time, walking time only enhances performance, enhances critical thinking, makes us in a better mood to have those, elephant in the room type conversations. Like, are people not thinking, like, are they not prioritizing properly? Or is it that you were supposed to be investing every day before in your meditation fitness to be ready to hold out for 3 days for the retreat?
Ronnie, I think that's a great question, and it boggles me too. It boggles me too. So, I try and think, okay, why wouldn't people want to do this? And maybe it's something as simple as the practical issue of, hey, they're there for 2 days, maybe three. Okay, and gee, they went out the night before. There was a very nice dinner. Maybe they had a drink or two. They needed to sleep in. Okay, they want multiple coffees in the morning before we get going. Nobody wants to have a power walk at 7 a.m. or yoga by the pool at 7 a.m. So it might be something practical like that. But I think that, if we think about what the role of the non-official time together is, so fine, whether we're doing facilitation or whether we're managing small group exercise, whether we're doing some sort of upskilling, et cetera, as a group. Okay, I'm talking about the other time, which is the meals. Maybe there's a winery tour or a special activity, etc. Um, I think maybe the breaks. These are all very, 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 very powerful times for the informal conversations to take place. And I know certainly on the retreats that we manage, we curate that time so that we're able to have those conversations and answer those one-on-one questions and encourage the small relationship building conversations that will actually help actualize whatever people have learned, right? And so, fine, we're gonna have team dinner or maybe two team dinners. Yes, we're going to bring lunch. We're going to take some time. Maybe it's a working lunch. Maybe it's just informal conversations, etc. I like the early morning activities because that clears the mind. It provides another one. I love the idea of the group hikes, the end of where people pair up and they're hiking through the woods or whatever it happens to be. But I think also different organizations have different cultures, right? And it could very well be that the culture of some is to do different things. I don't know. I think it's great to try different things sometimes when maybe you've not done it before. There's only so many high ropes courses and only so many winery tours that you could sort of do, and maybe a short hike in the woods, for example, for an hour might achieve a lot more in terms of building relationships than going on that other winery tour. Or maybe you do both. I don't know. But the idea of it being curated within the concept, within the story arc of how that retreat is put together is really important. And it's an opportunity. I agree. Okay, I agree. So
Okay, in terms of costs, it's always easier to outsource and delegate, but there's costs to that. Talk to me about, hiring that designated event planner. We're talking, I mean, yes, we can talk about napkins, but really, like you said, for impact, the content, strategizing that, is it better to have that done internally by the HR, CFO, CEO who knows the team, knows what they need, or to outsource that portion of it?
So let's recognize one thing, and I know you do, Rania, but that particular skill is a very particular skill. It's not something that somebody wakes up and suddenly they're an expert at. Whether it's booking the transportation or negotiating with the venue for better rates, and like there's a whole bunch of things that go into that particular skill, and sometimes that skill exists internally. We've worked with one client where they had an internal skill to do that kind of thing, and it worked out just fine. And we also worked with another client where, frankly, they outsourced that to somebody who does an awful lot of their events in terms of the logistics and everything. And that also worked out very well. Okay, in both cases, that event person understood the client exceptionally well, whether internally or externally, and they also knew how to work with well, people like us, because what makes a great um, uh, retreat or offsite or board education day or whatever it happens to be is one where the logistics don't get in the way and the content and the interactions that we put together um, become primary. There's space for that to grow. There's space for that to live in people's minds rather than people being distracted from all the logistics. So yeah, it's definitely a skill, and it's frustrating, frankly, for us when that skill isn't kind of part of the team, either internally or externally, just because there's often a lot of running around, or it distracts people from the learning or the relationship building, etc. So yeah, it's worthwhile. But you could have the best logistics, and you could have the best, you know, organization of all of the minutiae, but if the syllabus or the agenda is not like locked and customized for the group, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So if you had a choice as to where to spend, you got to spend on both. But listen, you're there for a reason, and you want to make sure that that reason actually exists.
Randall, I want to circle back. You talked before about like you recommended getting team members to travel together, to fly together, to get in the same car together. Um, please correct my thinking. I understood you shared that as if that was the right thing or best thing to do. For me, I'm thinking of my travel time when I travel for work. I'm crossing a lot of T's and dotting a lot of I's during my travel time. I'm trying to get ahead if I'm going to take off. I'm batten down the hatches at home. I'm taking a nap on the flight, whatever I could do to calm myself and get in the headspace before the event. Do you really think people should be doing all that before their travel, or is that travel like a good time to decompress and get ahead?
Well, that's a good point. And let's call a spade a spade. If you're asking somebody to take 2 or 3 days away from the office,
And
maybe
home.
some of that time should be spent getting ahead. Maybe there's a bunch of personal stuff that needs to be addressed too, just so that they've got a clear head. But you know something, there's also a case to be made on the other side, which is, hey, the retreat starts as soon as the transportation starts. And what I would say is that maybe we can't do everything perfectly, but you know, if we use this as one more opportunity, if two people are booked on the same flight and they're sitting next to each other or on the same train or the same car, etc., hopefully the person who's driving is not taking a nap, for example. But if you've got them booked, okay, you're probably going to have a conversation and you'll probably get to know the person just that much better. And some of the stuff you'll talk about is work stuff, and some of the stuff will be just plain relationship building. And so, I certainly think the more senior you get, the more valuable that one-on-one time is with your peers. But I do want to acknowledge what you say. This is people's time, and they may need to actually get that report out or review employee, whatever it happens to be, or finish up this project or whatever. And they may need to use some of that time. So.
On to the next. What about individual hotel rooms versus roommates at the hotel? Is it reasonable to ask people to roommate up?
I've been in those situations as well. Okay, where everyone was asked, and other places where everyone was given private. Um, you know something, it really depends on the culture of the organization. In a certain sense, you're with people all day from crack of dawn to very, very late at night. And to give people a little bit of time just to be by themselves and decompress, maybe to have that conversation with a significant other or a young child, maybe just to check a couple emails and make a couple calls or respond to voicemails or something. There's some merit in actually having people not share, right? But I can make the same case on the other side as well. If part of the goal of this is to build relationships, if you're getting people to share together, maybe it's not the worst thing. Um, I was at a retreat many years ago. The rooms were like $800-900 a room per night, an awful lot. Okay, and for a bunch of reasons, the organization felt that it was an important thing to have it at this particular place, and it just wouldn't make sense at that rate per night to have everyone have an individual room, and everyone understood it, and there was a conversation about it beforehand. And so it was no big thing. Okay, maybe that was the culture in that organization, but in other organizations, maybe it would be a big thing. In which case, they should have maybe done another venue or tried another approach. So,
I could go back and forth with these, this versus that for the rest of the hour. But we can circle back to other topics, and I'm happy to hear other people's suggestions also for our compare and contrast exercise. But I want to let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk about talking about money. Like when it comes to um, talking with your team about what's being spent. So, like, if there's the fancy hotel for $900 a night, they can look that up online and go, wow, this is expensive. Or if for the lobster dinner as well, this is expensive, or this is a nice treat. But when it comes, for example, to the cost of a facilitator, maybe they don't know whether the person, was a what price tag was associated with that. Is it appropriate to say to the team, we're spending X amount of money, on all of you to for get training today? Like, is that appropriate to say, how do you do it in a non-tacky way?
so this is not something you and I've ever done, ever. Okay, and there's one management consultant. This person does not do retreats. Who's just a management consultant who's consulting on a particular problem, and he drives up to the client in it's a true story in the Rolls Royce, and he's talking to uh, the sales team, I guess it was. And somebody, a senior person in the sales per team, the VP of sales says, "Why should I listen to you?" And the CEO says, "You should listen to him because he's here for 2 hours and I'm paying him $18,000. That's why you should listen to." And gee, I wish I got paid $18,000 for every 2 hours that I spent on one thing or the other. But I think it's important for the everybody to understand that the people that are in front of you are people hopefully of substance. and that they have that experience and they've perhaps been in your shoes actually, or in more senior roles than most of the people around the table. And that yes, they can operate at this particular level. And yes, they've got all those things. Um, the issue of how much to pay for a hotel or how much to pay for the dinner or how much to pay for whatever, it's partly a question of saying, if our desire is to make sure that people have a quote, a premium experience, okay, what does that mean in terms of the people we put in front of everyone? Okay, what does it mean in terms of our decision to go for this kind of meal versus that kind of meal, right? On the other hand, um, I've also seen situations where people say, I just can't believe the CEO just ordered $1,000 bottle of wine. What a colossal waste of money. This is ridiculous. We're talking about such and such in the retreat and they're buying $1,000 bottle of wine. They might not know the CEO is actually paying for that wine personally, one way or the other, but it doesn't matter. There's some incongruity between the two, excuse me, and therefore you want to make sure that everyone knows that you're being prudent with your expenditures. In terms of what our fees are a small portion of the overall everything, right? And we certainly can, we're not the most expensive by far in terms of what we do, and we're not the cheapest, right? And so if somebody wants to talk about that, the CEO or whoever's organizing it shouldn't have a problem talking about it. Okay, the answer will not be, well, they're in front of us for 1 hour or 2 hours, we're paying $18,000 for the privilege. Okay. I think what also happens is that some people don't realize that if you're actually running a retreat properly, there's a huge amount of preparation from the facilitators. In our case, it's simply like, we're interviewing every single person around the table most of the time. We're spending time with the leadership, okay, making sure that their roles and issues, etc., are being addressed. We're spending time preparing specific to the client deliverables and specific to client presentation and training rather than taking the same thing out and just doing a copy paste with a client name. Like there's a lot of work that actually goes into it. That does not happen magically a week before the event. So from my perspective, I don't have any problems with sharing and justifying what the cost is. Certainly because we're not the most expensive, but we're not the cheapest either because of the work effort. I think the biggest problem, excuse me, is when there's this incongruity, right? And either spending too much on the stuff that is not going to move the needle, okay, or not spending enough on things that will. And if we're able to sort of solve those things, people will say, this has been a great retreat because we've been able to learn a lot more, build relationships, and we actually have a new common vocabulary for moving forward beyond this. So.
Okay, those are very, very pointed words, Randall. Very good. Where do you see organizations being penny wise and pound foolish? On that topic, we're going to break right here. This part one, we're going to continue with more Q&A in the next session. But if anything we talked about so far resonates with you, please do reach out. I'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can reach us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call, www.randallcraig.net/30, and we'll see you back next time.